Hello, it is Backpick Brain, and before the regularly scheduled Super Auto Pets video gets recorded, thought I'd just quickly go over this balance change set. Now, if you did play on the Super Auto Pets test server, which I'm not going to explain now, it's not really relevant here, but they test some of these, and which means I remember some of them. And there's also, I'll just quickly, before I go to the actual game balance changes, I'll talk about what the dev talks about here. There's gonna be a next expansion pack. It's gonna be mythological stuff, which is all pretty cool. Some bug fixes, and then this is the paper version of the graphical changes here. So, but this is easier to look at, and it lets you see what the pets are, rather than, because I don't myself know all of these pets. I think I've played with everything here except for an Anteater. I don't think an Anteater's been in a weekly since I've been playing, and I don't play non-weekly stuff by and large. But regardless, let's just, from the perspective of someone who's half decent at ranked Super Auto Pets, this is just my 2 cents on a lot of these changes. Okay, so I think there's if I can read them in parallel, I'll do well to do that. Let me just get the direct text open, but we'll start with the camel. So it's gone from 2, 2, 4, 4, and 6, 6 to 1, 2, 2, 4, and 3, 6. It gives one less attack, proportionally speaking, and I think it's probably reasonable enough. I think camel, especially for a tier 3, giving a lot of buffs was pretty powerful with the synergy of the elephant. Most obvious synergy in the game probably, and the early stats were probably way too powerful. If you compare it to something like a hatching chick, right, which gives you +4/+4 temporarily, but you could also use camel synergy with a leech, so on and so forth. I don't think this will change much about the camel though, to be honest. I think it'll still be quite used about as well as it is now. If you weren't gonna pick up a camel before, you aren't going to. If you were going to, you're not gonna stop because of this. So we'll just move on. This is one of the bigger changes. This and the owl, since they're basically linked pretty much directly, right? So this says minor, but of course it's pretty major if you think about how the functionality of the owl works, which I'll explain in a moment. The mouse is going from 1, 2 to 3, 2, and instead of stocking a free apple, it's stocking a 1 gold apple. Now, what was essentially the primary role of the mouse was to give you a 2-cost apple. Or if you level the mouse, which most people wouldn't level a base tier mouse, you would get a leveled mouse from an owl, right? So you would get 2 gold and a free better apple, which is 2, 2, right? So this goes from 1, 1, 2, 2, and 3, 3 in terms of buffs, if that's not something you knew. And now basically this means it's worth it to buy a mouse in your first turn, because if you bought a mouse in your turn 1 or turn 2, you're pretty much guaranteed to lose, because a 1-2 with no in-battle effect is not going to get you a win in the fight, right? But that's now it's actually switched from something that you use to get cheap buffs to something that's like a momentum maintainer. It's basically the same kind of thing as Beaver, except you can control where the apple goes to, but it's no longer a free buff. And there's also I'll tie into the owl change here. Owl's gone from like a 1-2, I believe, to a 4-4, which is pretty big in terms of now the owl is not a completely useless stat unit. It is of course still gonna make you force warded though. And now the mouse basically pays for its own apple, so you don't get extra gold as well as a free apple. You stay at 10 gold, because if you're gonna buy the apple, you're gonna spend the exact amount of gold that I believe. No, it's actually 1 gold away. Okay. So you get 0 extra gold on a level 1, 1 extra gold on a level 2, and 2 extra gold on level 3. Oh, it's not as bad as I thought initially, but a level 1 owl is gonna be fairly useless, if I'm being honest, because 1 extra gold and a free buff is probably exactly worth 1 spare slot, to be honest, right? And as you level the owl, the gold returns increase. It makes it worth the investment of leveling it in the first place. I feel like the owl's gonna drop off quite a bit, but of course, you know, times can change. This is pretty big. Ox gets a bit of a stat buff, but now instead of gaining melon indefinitely and gaining attack, it gains melon temporarily, or rather per turn, once, twice, or thrice depending on the level. So big change part 1, it no longer gains attack. Now one of the biggest things that you could do is like load up faint pets in front of an ox to get the attack up. So something like a sheep, which summons the 2 rams outside of it, right? The trigger would happen twice, you'd get attack up twice with the ox. No longer going to be the case, not as good, for sure. And also the weekly recently with the mole and the ox, which basically meant that you would keep reactivating the mole, that's no longer going to be the case, so you're only going to get 1 melon or 2 or 3 depending on if you level the ox. Previously leveling the ox didn't matter for that build. Now you basically need level 3 ox for that mole build to work, which I think is fair because I think it was way too overpowered for how early you can get it in the turn counter. I think they could have kept the attack buff in. They should have probably kept the attack buff in. But I don't mind limiting the number of melons just for that specific interaction. Because the mole itself is fine, but with the ox it goes crazy. This is a shark kind of retweak. It's no longer a 4-2, I think it's a 2-2, but now it gains +2/+2, 4/4, and 6/6 instead of I think 1/2. So it's gonna scale better with the faint pets, which I think is pretty good. And it's, you know, equally as vulnerable to being sniped or whatever as it always was. I think this is just better to keep a shark around. Definitely a more impactful change than nerfing the camel. I think the shark's gonna be more viable because it's gonna gain the attack back if 2 pets faint, basically, if you think that way, right? Because it gains 1 more attack than it used to and it's lost 2 attacks. So if 2 pets faint, it's basically like it was before. So if you put it at the back of your team, it's automatically better by default. So I think you just keep the shark around. Anteater. Now this is a pet I never really used before, so I can't speak to how it used to work. I think if I just quickly, not to spoil, where is it? The Anteater. Where, there it is, right. It used to be summon 2 level 1, level 2, and level 3 ants. Now it summons 1, 2, and 3 level 3 ants. Now, I think that seems really, I think, just objectively better, if I'm being honest. It of course means you'll have to move it further back as you level it, but that's also perfectly fine. You can maybe you can pill an anteater, but I don't know if pilling an anteater that makes sense because you need more pills and you can't level the level 3 ants. All in all, I think this probably, because if I think about it, a level 3 anteater will summon 3 1/1s, which is 3/3 in stats. And those 3/3 in stats will produce 9/9 in stats collectively. So it's kind of a 12/12, but it's staggered, which might be worse or might be better. And it's also not, it's gonna buff like pets in the back, more likely. So overall, I think it's compared, that's if I compare it to what it used to be, right? To summoning to, like, it's this by default is better here. It's better here. And I think, I don't know what the stat base is for a level 3 ant. It would have to be a 7/7, right? Because you need 1, 2, 3, 4. You need 5 or 6/6. No, 7/7 because the base stats is a 2/2. So this basically what would have been, I think it would have been pretty strong at level 3 and pretty bad level 1 and 2. So now it's just kind of balanced. I think it's fine, but I don't think it'll see that much use anyway. That is tier 3 maybe, but you know, I'm not worried about it. This is just a minor change, I think, but it's more like a usefulness change. It just means that if there's no friend ahead, the panda will not like faint for no reason. Previously, if you put a panda at the front of your squad it would just faint, but it would not give the buffs anywhere. So this means that like the Komodo, which I've tried once, you can use a panda and have it at the front and it's be fine. And another thing, you can keep a panda at the front until it's level 2, because technically speaking, if the panda gives you diminishing returns in stats until you get it to level 3, right? Or level 2 is going to give you equal returns, level 3 is going to give you bonus. So you can keep a panda at the front till you get to level 2. And I think that's actually a viable strategy. So I think the qualifiers is a major change. I think it's definitely just going to make panda more consistent. You won't have to worry about. You can keep the panda at the front like as soon as you buy it as a tier 2, which is pretty damn useful. Did panda's tier get changed? I'm not sure. Was it always a tier 2? I don't recall, personally speaking. I think they may have tweeted it out. Let me just double check this. This is turning out to be quite a long video, but that's perfectly fine. Patch notes. Panda. No, it was always a tier 2. Okay, well that just makes it better. This is a bit of a retweak or change, I guess is the, doesn't matter how I call it. Instead of buffing a strawberry pet, it replaces a pet with strawberry and gives it the stats instead. But it gives it more stats than it used to. So basically this means you can't just constantly cycle stats into a strawberry pet. But now you can use strawberry as like a short-term, it's like an investment, and then you take away that investment that you put and you give a buff. It's kind of like a tier 1. It's like paying. It's kind of like paying 5 gold for a pair, which kind of sucks, to be honest. Now that I think about it, because you want to keep your early game. I think it might be fine, because if you just had nothing else to do but spend your gold on a strawberry, and then you can buy like 2 kiwis that show up in a shop and just, or you can't buy 2 anymore. That's another problem. Yeah, so I just think that replacing the strawberry perk is just kind of straight up worse. Because you want the strawberry perk for synergies, like your cassowary will no longer buff itself with the strawberry perk. You won't be able to like shoebill or pelican buff with the strawberry perk, because you're going to replace them and you're going to have to keep rebuying them if you want the synergies to activate again. So I think the kiwi is actually just gonna, it'll be better in weeklies which are arranged without intentional strawberry implementation. So if it's a random weekly and there's no other synergies, you probably don't mind this, which is, it's just like fine. But it just seems worse in most ways than before. That's just my opinion. This is just kind of a nice nerf, I think. It scales the stats of the level 1, 2, and 3 to a fixed number instead of being kind of, it's kind of reduces some of the randomness, because you could get like a level 3, let me think about it, like a level 3 dragonfly versus like a level 3, what's a decent tier 4, like I don't know, turtle, something like that, and they would be different statted because they have different base stats, and so they would be different. They'd like be vastly different just as a unit, let alone the abilities. And it would also kind of, if you got like a level 2 stalk early, you could get insane statted pets coming out of it and destroy people. So I think this just brings because I think they're trying to bring the levels in line with the fixed stat increases from leveling a pet itself, which you'll see later on as well. They do it here on the platypus, but now this iguana is being moved to tier 2. No, let's double check I didn't miss any. The anteater is being moved to tier 3. I think it used to be a tier 5. Tier 4, okay. Yeah. It's got the highlighted changes, just to be clear, but I didn't notice it there, that's fine. So now it deals, instead of doing 1, 2, and 3 damage, it does 2, 4, and 6 damage, and it's got a bit of a, it's got 2 more attack, but it's a tier 2. I think it's staying pretty useless, because I think summoning, because first of all, leveling is going to be harder because it's a tier 2. Second of all, 3-3 as a tier 2 is not necessarily that great anyway. And also, it's just not that good of an effect out of niche situations. But it's gonna be fine to pick it up just as a filler item, filler guy, which is fine. Starfish is just being moved to tier 4. I don't think it needed to be, but I mean, that's fine. There's nothing much to say about this. It just makes it a bit worse. I wouldn't take it on level up unless it was a really sell weekly, but whatever. Okay, Platypus is being tweaked quite a bit. It's now sell and faint, which means that it actually has an in-battle use. Now, what I'm confused about kind of in the wording, it says 1-3-3 level 1 duck and beaver. Does that mean does it mean 1-3-3 duck and 1-3-3 beaver? I assume so, because otherwise the wording would make no sense, because you can't combine them, obviously. So this basically means it's a 2-2, which is a nerf, I think, but on a tier 4 that on faint summons 6/6 worth of stats, just by default, that's pretty good. At level 3, summoning 18 worth of stats, 2 9/9s, that's not bad, to be honest. Even at level 2, 2 6/6 is not bad. And now it's you can also just use the cell trigger like you always could, and it just works perfectly fine like it did before. So it's got in-battle use and an out-of-battle use, which is, I think, it's just a buff to the Platypus. You could consider picking up a Platypus just as it is and not feel bad about it. Or bad at like wasting a slot, you know what I mean. This just got added to the star pack, nothing to talk about. Well, I mean, I guess if you care about that, but Cockatoo got moved down to tier 4 and now only buffs 2 faint pets. I think that makes sense because at tier 5, it just wasn't worth it buying. Not even to mention the fact that when you're gonna have 3 faint pets in your squad, it's kind of a niche, right? So bringing it down to 2 and bringing it down to tier 4, it makes it more usable, in my opinion. I think I may have gotten a stat tweak. I think maybe it wasn't a 4-2 before, or maybe it was, but you know, relative stat tweak, I guess. It's still weak, but now it's probably worth buying and selling if you have 2 faint friends, because having 2 is way easier than having 3, if you think about it in that sense. Now, this guy got moved to tier 5, and I think the wording got changed to, instead of activating faint ability, it said activate ability on the nearest faint friend, which seems to be a semantic change. I don't know what effect it may have in a different sense. I don't know what different effects it'll have, because the wording is changed, but the meaning is still the same. The faint friend behind its ability is going to be activated. But now it's a tier 5. And it's now got more attack, which seems reasonable enough. Muskox just said it's until end of battle. It basically just means you can't pill something in front of the Muskox and buff it permanently, which is probably fine, because it was like if you pilled a blobfish in front of it, you would get insane stat boost, something like that. Pill an ant. Basically, if you were pilling something anyway, you just move it in front of the Muskox for free stats, which I think is unintended, for like a 1-cost buff to be so permanent. So Durian added to Golden Pack. I think this is a completely new fruit. I don't remember seeing it around before. This basically is a level 1 skunk effect activated before attacking, which is like a good way to counter scaling, I think. If you put Durian on 1 or 2 of your pets, or your front pet, it's basically, you don't have to use a slot for the skunk, but you also can't level a food up. In terms of how useful it is, as a tier 5, you're competing with stuff like chili, pepper. Obviously it's the same slot as chocolate, which you always want to buy. It's probably pretty good on like a high attack unit, but on a high health unit, kind of average usability. I'd be more interested to see this in effect. I think it's worth picking up if you have it, but I don't think I would be searching for it. The way I might search for a chili pepper on, or chili. A chili for a high health unit, or a pepper for like a low health unit. This seems like a general purpose rather than a niche, which is fine. This basically just the waffle. Now it has secondary use of giving +4 health. Just means that you can use the waffle even if you don't have a buy ability, which is just no longer completely useful for custom packs. Now just quickly to go over some of this basic stuff. Stat nerf here. I think the wording got changed from rightmost to frontmost because people got confused because they're thinking the like wording or whatever in the actual like versus screen. Sometimes it's no longer rightmost because they're on the left side. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's fine. Penguin got a stat nerf, probably deserved because it's an early scaler. Shrimp. What happened to the shrimp? Those noises are my Windows telling me nothing is found on the page. Yes, indeed. It got literally 1 health nerf. Highly irrelevant. Owl we discussed already. Tabby Cat stat buff. Koala stat buff. Probably deserved because it was too weak before. Piranha stat buff, but I mean, as a tier 6, it's kind of... You need a buffer, you need a moose for this to have any effect. Ew, this is actually a fairly reasonable change. It's no longer a 3-4, then becomes a 3-6. Now it's a 4-2, then becomes a 4-3. But if you have a health scaler, it's just better because it starts off with more attack and the health will boost itself further, which is reasonable. Frog stat buff, now it's probably worth picking up at level 1, tier 1. Sabertooth goes from 6-6 to 5-5 with the pets it summons, and I think its health is also changed. Apparently Sabertooth is spelled with an R-E, not with an E-R, not an R-E. Yeah? It's no longer 8 attack. That's fine. This thing, the Chameleon, it got nerfed because it no longer triggers the toy ability, it just copies the toy ability and reenacts it, so now it's got a stat buff, so it's not useless. Crane is just redistributed from 9-2 to 6-5, the same aggregate stat total, and slight buff to Manta. All in all, it's just, you know, what's my summary of this balance change? Mouse is better. Mouse is going to be the things that actually change how you use and play rather than just being better or worse. Actual gameplay style changes. Mouse and Owl are the biggest ones by far. Maybe Platypus and Panda can fit in there. Because Mouse, you now want to buy as many mice as you can in tier 1 and then sell them for stat buffs on your better units later. And I would even consider leveling mice at this point, because now it's no longer going to be a liability in stats. It's going to be a useful, strong enough unit, and that's going to have a stat effect later as well. It's just going to be like Beaver plus. So that's also useful. Ox will see less use. Panda will probably see more use. Kiwi will probably see less use. You know, I think I've covered the other bases pretty well. So yeah, it's been Backpack Brain. This is a bit of a long video. It may not be to your liking, but you know, I would want to talk about this before I go into the actual sad video. And yeah, if you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe, follow, etc. Everything helps the algorithm. And yeah, enjoy.